Hello everyone, welcome to the 13th iOS tutorial. In this tutorial we will create a tip calculator app, and what you should watch is UISlider, and this is a review session again for IB Outlet and IB Action since it's an important part, so I decided to add another application to use these IB Outlet and IB Action. And this is the first time that we are going to use an actual instance variables inside of the application. So let's move on. Okay, before developing this application, let's review the final product, what we are going to create. We have a static label which shows bill amount, and underneath we have a field to input the bill. For example, we got a bill with $100, and we have a percentage. Let me put the $100 here. We have a dynamic label which shows the value of this slider. If we move this slider, this value will change. And also we have a calculate button, which when we hit this button, it will show the tip amount based on this percentage and the total bill. So let's see, we have if we have a bill with the amount of $100, we have a total bill with the 115 and tip amount be $15. And if I change this slider, for example 18, it will change the tip amount and total live. So if I have, for example, $50 bill and calculate it, it would have this amount, and as you can see, if I change the value of slider, it will change. So let's move on and create this app. Okay, let's create the app. As you would expect, I want to create a new project. You should be familiar by this time. A single view app, and then we name it tip calculator, and organization, of course, hook stack, and don't want a prefix for this, and it's just for iPhone. And next we want to have it inside of the developer, and here it is. And let's go to the storyboard. If you remember, we have different labels, fields, and this stuff. Let's add to the storyboard and use the blue guideline and have a bill amount, and underneath that we have a text field. So let's move a text field and make it wider, and also we have another label which was this time dynamic, and it's called tip percentage, and the initial amount is 15%. So then we need a slider. This is the first time that we add this slider, so you just grab this slider and drag it to the view. That's as simple as this. So let's grab it, make it wider, and add it to the view. And also underneath that we have a button which is called calculate. Calculate. Let's use the blue guideline to add the view elements. Then we have tip amount. Then see, I have to add it in the middle of the screen, so use the blue guideline. Also we have total column. Let's add column here as well. Add it in the middle. Add this in the middle. And if you do all of this and you see when you run the program every element are not in the right position, don't worry, I will dedicate a session to talk about the constraints and all iOS 7 stuff for adding view elements. Right now, you just, after you use blue guideline and add the stuff, just do what I say here. Go to this menu, resolve auto layout issues, and say clear constraints, and then say reset to suggested constraint, and happily use it. I will dedicate one session to see what is exactly doing behind the scene for all of these elements. So this is all the view elements that we need. Let's move on and create the app and connect these view elements to the controller. Okay, let's connect the view elements to the controller. If we show the assistant, which is this button, and it will show automatic. If it was an automatic, it should show the view controller.m. Let's remove all of unnecessary file here, and we have a simple app here. And we say we want to connect all of the dynamic fields, dynamic labels. So this one is always fixed, bill amount, but this one field, it's not fixed. So let's connect it to the view. And we just control drag to this area. Since this is an outlet, we could call it total fill. Enter. We also have tip percentage. Let's control drag this one as well. We would call it tip percentage label, and enter. We have a slider here, so we would say tip percentage slider, and this calculate is not the outlet because this is, this is not the outlet, this is action, IB action. But tip amount is IB outlet, so let's call it tip amount label, and also total, I would call it result label, result label. So these are all of the outlet that we have, but we need to connect also actions, IB action. As we know, one of the action is calculate, and it can, when the view wants to talk to the controller, when we want to send a message from view to the controller, we use IB action. So this time we need to connect this as an IB action. So we add IB outlet between interface and end, but IB action should be between implement and end. So this time we connect this here, and we say, what do we want to call it? We can calculate pressed. Let me zoom in, and it's calculate pressed. And UI button, we don't want a sender with none, arguments, none. So it connects. It has IB action, calculate press. We also need another IB action. We added IB outlet for this slider, as you can see if I hover it, but the view also wants to talk to the controller, because when the user change the slider, view wants to send a message to the controller, and it says, okay, I'm changed, what should I do? So we have to add this as an action to the implementation part, and we don't have sender here, so I say sender none, and we say tip percentage change. Let's say tip percentage changed, and we are done. So we added all of the view elements and connected all of the view elements to the controller. Okay, one thing that we forgot to set in view elements was the minimum, maximum, and also initial value of this slider. In order to do that, you can do it programmatically, but since we can do it through the storyboard, I will prefer to do it here. So if we just click on this button, on the right button, and show the right hand side and go to the inspector element, attribute inspector, sorry, and click on this. You have to also select the slider to see these options, and you can see the value. You can set the minimum, maximum, and also the initial value. So we would say we want a tip percentage from 1 to, let's say, 20. Sometimes people do 30. So let's do 20. And we want to have the initial value to be 15. So this is how we set minimum, maximum, and initial value. Before writing the code, let's think how we can develop this application. When the user press calculate button, we need to have this amount, the bill amount, and also the slider value. Then we can calculate the tip amount and also total. So these two key factors are our main concern. So in order to return this value and get this value, we have a property called text. So we just have to have this outlet and return the text output. And for this, we have a property called value, and we just use this property to get the value. Right now, the initial value is 15. So for the first time when the user click on the calculate button, it will return 15 for the value of this slider. Let's go to the code and see what's the actual. So as I said, we need the tip percentage, so we define an integer called tip percentage, and we get the value from the slider, which is tip percentage slider, and the property called value. So it will store the tip percentage slider value to the tip percentage variable. This is local variable. And then let's grab the bill amount. We need the float because it's a decimal point, and we call it bill amount. And how do we return it? We would say equals to self dot total filled dot text. But it will give us a warning, and it says, okay, the type is not matched. So because this is float and this is string, and that's why it gives us this error. How do we convert it? We have a handy method called float value. So if we just add a square bracket and say float value, close it, it will not give us an error. Okay, the next thing that we need is to calculate the tip amount. So it is also a float because this one really needs a decimal value as well, and we call it tip amount, and we say how do we calculate it? It's by multiplying this by this and divided by 100. So this is how we calculate the tip actually. So tip percentage multiplied by bill amount and divided by 100. This is just the math in order to calculate the tip amount. And we have a total bill, which is just adding this tip amount and bill amount. So we would say it's equal to tip amount plus bill amount. So we have all of these numbers here. We now have to update the view. So in order to update the view, we have all of the labels here. One of the labels is tip amount, the other one is total. Also, we need to change this as well. Let's do this at the end. But we have tip amount and total. How do we use it? How do we change it? We need the NS number in order to wrap this float values and then add it to the labels. As you remember, in order to have it for the label or put it in inside of an array, we need to have it on NS number and wrap it. So let's wrap this. The first one, we need the NS number. NS number, total bill wrapper. So it's equal to NS number with float, and we call it total bill. We add our total bill. So what this NS number does, it just wraps this float inside of an object in order to have it for a label value. And we need to add another one for tip amount, NS number, and it's tip amount wrapper equals to NS number with float, and we wrap the tip amount. Now we can add to the label. Let's say self dot tip amount label dot text. If you remember from previous session, this tip amount label is this one in view. Let me show you. This is tip amount label. We want to change it once the user press calculate. So we want to change also total as well. So we have outlet for these two. See, we have an outlet for result label and tip amount label. So tip amount label is here, and we want to set it. Let's go back to the bigger view. Yes, and we put it as NS string, say tip amount wrapper and string value. And we have the same thing for the result, and we call it result label dot text equals to total bill wrapper and string value. If we don't add this string value, because this is a NS number, it will give us an error. So it's better, we better put string value in order to not have error. It's just a wrapper, and a wrapper has these method called a string value that we use it to set up this string. But right now, if we run the program and add this, let's see what would happen. In the demo, I showed you that it should show tip amount column and the amount, and also total column and the total bill. But here we didn't add these words, we just add the amount. So we need to add this as well. But before that, let's see what we developed till right now. Okay, let's say we have a $100 bill. We calculate, it's working, but we need to add the tip amount at the beginning and total in front of this. So let's add this. We have a handy method which was called, I remember that I showed you before, which is NSString, string with format. So yeah, let's use it here. NSString, string with format, and then column here, and then comma. So we added here, we call it tip amount and percent at sign. So what it does, it just gets this string, add this string, and instead of this percent at sign, it will add this value. We have the same thing for here. Call it NSString, string with format, and percent at sign, and comma here. And here we say total would be percent at sign. Okay, and now let's see 100, and it's working right now. But what if we change the slider? The slider doesn't change anything when we change the slider, but if we calculate again, it will show the result. So how we can add functionality that once we change the slider, it will change the amount as well. Let's go back to the controller and see. Basically, we need all of these methods to calculate the tip when they changed. So we need to copy paste all of this in this method. If you remember, this is the time that the slider changed, and that's why we used IB action for the percentage. We need all of this for here as well, and so we need to copy paste all of this, but this is not a good best practice actually. In order to not having a duplicate code, it's better to create a method and use a method name for each function. So I will create a method called update result, and inside of this method I just copy paste all of the things that I added here. Okay, and then I would say inside of here I would just call this method. I would say update result, and that's all I need for calculate. It would do the same thing, but instead I can call this method here as well and say update and self update result, and let's see if it's working, and see if I have $100 bill and say calculate, and if I change, it will work. So, but one last more piece is changing this amount as well. See, right now it's stuck on 15% as an initial value, but we need to change this as well. But let's go back and change it. How we can access it? Through the tip percentage label. We can access this label. So how do we change it? We would say we want to change it once they change the percentage. So before this, updating the result, we need to change the tip percentage label. So we say self.tip percentage label this time, .text, and this time we want to have we need to add this tip percentage. So this tip percentage is a local variable. How do we access it? So it's better to access it to have an instance variable in order to access it here. Right now, if I put tip percentage, it will give me an error because it cannot access this tip percentage here. So it's better to define an instance variable. In order to define an instance variable, if you remember, we just add a curly brace here and say int, and we have here tip percentage. Tip percentage here and semicolon. So we just don't need this int because we define it as an integer and instance variables. So now we can access it here and say tip percentage. But it will not work because this is float and this is text. This is a string. So in order to fix this, you just have to use our handy method, which was n as a string with format, and now we say column. Let's remove this. Say comma, and at the end one close the square bracket, and we say tip percentage. And in front of it, we would say percent. This time it's not percent at sign because this is a float. We would say percent. It's the integer. We would say percent %d. And because we want the percent at the end, I'll show you what to do. But let's just do this and see what is the result. Oh, we should add the close bracket here. And now let's run the program and see what we developed. Come on. Okay. Let's see. Right now it's 15. Let's add, it would be $40. Calculate. If I change it, it will change also this label as well. But if I want to add the percent here, I want to add percent, it should say tip percentage 70% as percent sign. So if I add percent at the end, it will give me error, actually a warning, incompatible format, because this is a reserved character here. We put percent at sign, percent %d, percent %f, and it expects something here. In order to tell the compiler that this is just the percent sign, we should say percent. It means that 2% right after each other. And let's run the program. And you can see we have percent here. So if I have 56, calculate the total, 64, tip amount 8.5, and it's working. And that's all. Add your questions and your comments below, or you can access the detail of this application under our website hookstack.blogspot.com. Have a good time.